Hi, I'm Ferre with TaxSaleSupport.com. I'm here with Stephen Swenson, and this is one of our bad deal reviews where we look at a deal that's come through the tax sale market recently where we don't understand why somebody paid as much as they paid, or at least from what we can see, it appears that somebody lost a fair amount of money. And so we're going to check out a couple of those properties right now.
It's complicated, so pay attention.
Yeah, absolutely. Part of the reason we do this is we want to educate investors. As we attend in auctions, in fact, every single month we take a group of our students to a live on-site auction and bid on properties there. And one thing that we see time after time is investors that haven't gone through and done the due diligence, or for whatever reason end up overpaying for a property because they got emotionally involved in the bidding. And this is actually a pretty good example of that. In fact, probably one of the largest losses that we've seen in at least a few years.
Yeah, normally with tax sale and investing, you don't see big losses. Even if people pay too much for a property, they're usually like paying higher percentages of value, but they're not paying over what the property is actually worth. And so there's a limited amount of money that they can actually lose. But in this case, I think they really actually are losing money. So this is a property that came up in the Michigan tax sale. And it's kind of a special property because it's right on Lake Michigan and it has beachfront.
You don't deserve a beach house.
And it had an opening bid amount of $31,443, so almost $32,000, let's say, was the opening bid amount. But it had an assessed value that's basically like 1.1 million, and a market value, at least at the time, they were saying it was closer to like 1.6 million is about what they were saying the property was valued at when the auction was taking place. Now that's a ton of money to pay, but I think a lot of what they're paying for is essentially, I guess, partly the location, I suppose.
Power is a lot like real estate. It's all about location, location, location.
It can't all be wrapped up in the house because the house is fairly simple.
Yeah, in fact, the house really is in need of a rehab. We can look at that roof. We can see a patch there on the roof, and overall it definitely needs some work. And so this was really, they paid this much because of the location, but they really overpaid. In fact, if we look at the value, they paid 1.6 million, almost 1.7 million for it. And it's valued at $1,067,000. So they lost over 500, almost $600,000 in buying this property. One thing that was kind of interesting is we wanted to do a little bit of market research to see, what type of other properties are for sale in the area. Is the value just underassessed? And here's an example. In fact, there were several different examples we can show, but this was a property that was picked up for, or that's currently for sale for 1.7. So maybe you could get it for 1.6. But in looking at the condition of this property, we're looking at two different conditions. One that needs a ton of work and one that has had, probably hundreds of thousands of dollars into rehabbing it and really making it look as a prime property.
Yeah, well, it's insane that that's also the market like price. You could currently pick this property up for the same price that they paid for this other one at tax sale just because they were trying to win it.
I hope I win.
No, that seems pretty crazy because this is clearly, a much nicer home. The lot itself, I don't know, maybe the other lot is better. This home is far better. And yeah, it's just crazy to think that for the cash price they paid for the tax sale property, they basically could own this property outright, and it didn't go through a tax sale, so it wouldn't have any of the title issues with it. This one also appears to be, a lakeside property there on Lake Michigan. So yeah, very interesting. And it's crazy to think that that property is only valued right now at closer to about $1 million because they did lose a substantial amount there just in over assessing what they believe the property to be valued at.
Big mistake. Big, huge.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, this property is located, about a third or maybe a half a mile from the property that sold at the tax sale. So it's located pretty close. In fact, I looked at a couple of different ones as well. Some were listed at 2 million, some were listed at 1.5. But in looking at all of the different sales, We're talking about properties that were in better condition, were larger, had been rehabbed, and even some located exactly next to the property were, quite a bit better properties that had sold for the same price that this person paid for it. So really what we're probably looking at an investor who ended up bidding on the property and really had more money than sense. Both of them who bid it against each other to bid it up to that $1.7 million cash price, they had to pay cash. There was also fees that they would have had to pay on top of that.
You've got to feel so dumb.
So they probably had $50,000 to $100,000 in additional fees that they would have paid on top of what they already paid for the property. And in looking at the comparables, you can get a better property for a cheaper price that you know exactly what it is. And so in this case, this is really where ego gets involved, where more money than sense gets involved, and they end up paying way more than they should have because they were so intent on winning the property.
Victory is mine.
Yeah, it really must come down to a couple of bidders that were just unwilling to give up on the property and were willing to bid each other up to well beyond what made any real sense. Just because it didn't take that much research or looking into the properties in the area to see, the price point they were at. They're paying, if they're nearly $1.7 million cash, that they were into a price point where they had a lot of options. And that is one crazy thing to see, is when you see somebody come into a tax sale and pay more than they would if they were just paying you out there on the market, for a property at full price. That's crazy, and that can only happen as a result of competition and not understanding the investment completely. That's really what a part of that is. It's just not fully understanding the investment, which is why you'd be willing to overpay for that much.
Yeah, well, and then looking at this property, you can see that it's got a nice deck, hot tub. It's got wood floors. It's bright. It's open. It's got sunrooms. Overall, a great property. Comparably to the property that we were looking at before that was sold at the tax sale that needs a ton of work.
Blast! This will take weeks to repair.
And so, we do this because we want to make sure you're aware. We don't want you to get emotionally involved and overbid and overpay for properties. We want you guys to do the due diligence so that when you are attending an auction, you're attending and bidding like an investor. We can.
Well, I think we've seen enough. I've certainly learned something.
We can always see the investors at the auction versus the non-investor, somebody who's just coming for the first time and hasn't done the due diligence that's required.
Yeah, it certainly becomes apparent with the bidding. When you know what the properties are and what people should be bidding, it tells you something about, the people that are bidding when the prices go into abnormal territory, like they certainly did with this property. But it's a teaching experience and a learning experience either way. It's interesting, and you can take a lot away from it by seeing somebody overpay like they did in this case.
Absolutely. Now, if you'd like to learn more, go ahead and check out our website, taxsalesupport.com. You can look into our membership program. We have a month-to-month program. We have a year program, and it's going to give you access to all of our auction list, to our weekly webinars, to our programs, everything that's included with this. In fact, me and Shade have been offering our program since 2007.
Sure, once. But that was a long time ago.
We believe it's the best value in tax sale education. We also offer a 30-day money-back guarantee because we are convinced it's the best value in tax sale education.
Yeah. Please join us. We'd love to have you. And we thank you for your time here and watching. Be sure to keep an eye out for the next video.
Absolutely. Thank you.